Okay, guys, we're going to get started now. Thanks, everybody, for coming. First, let me introduce Alicia Bembenek. She is a PhD. She was a professor of social psychology, and she decided to refocus her career and follow her passion for doing data visualization. And she is currently an insight analyst at the University of Maryland system.
And this is Mike Cisneros. This year, Mike was selected as a Tableau master for all of his excellent contributions to the Tableau community. In his day job, he is head of data visualization for DIAZ-ORTIZ. He has an inspiring portfolio of work. He has an excellent blog, and that has encouraged me and others to also create and share their own data visualization work. You can follow him on Twitter if you're not already at Mike Cisneros.
Okay, so today we want to talk to you about mentoring. Now, we have both been the people looking for advice and the people seeking advice in all different ways throughout our professional careers. Whether it was an ad hoc thing, whether it was an employee-mandated program, whether it was one-on-one or groups or everything in between. But for the past year, Alicia and I have been in a formal mentoring arrangement that we both found was, for us, the most successful and most beneficial arrangement of this type that we had been a part of. So what we're going to do today is talk about the lessons that we've learned from our own past experiences and the research that we have done on mentoring and how our experience was positive compared to every other experience that we had had.
So we'll talk about whether mentorship might also be right for you, and if you're thinking about a mentor, how you can set up that mentoring relationship. Because mentoring is a really broad term, and we're going to have a very specific definition for it. We're going to distinguish between mentorship and other types of professional relationships.
And we're going to talk about starting the process of finding a mentorship, because this is what most people think of as the hardest part of getting a mentoring relationship going, is how do you know who to look for? How do you know what kind of person would be a good mentor? And then how do you know if that person is going to be the right mentor for you? And we're going to give you some tips to figure out how to make those decisions to get your mentorship program started on the right foot.
And then we'll talk about how to structure it for success. So with this, we mean that we set up very specific logistics and goals and timelines and had expectations for each other. And in the process as well, tracking that progress and tracking those goals and milestones, and then having open and honest communication so that everybody's on the same page.
And throughout the entire time, we're going to be weaving in the stories from our own mentorship experience to show you how it's beneficial, not just to Alicia as the mentee, but to me as the mentor.
So my story starts with me looking for that kind of new and interesting hill to climb. I was a psychology professor for about 8 years, and then I had gained a lot of skills. Actually, looking back, I noticed that they were useful for data visualization. So for example, I was conducting research, I was collecting and analyzing my own data, I was teaching students, so I was thinking about how to effectively communicate, and then I just kept thinking throughout my career, I wonder if there's anything else I could do besides be a psychology professor with the set of skills that I had acquired over the years. And so then the next step was I took a role. I was helping to manage a volunteer association, and it was in that role that I learned more about marketing, and I learned more about graphic design, and that's how I learned about data visualization. And once I learned that there was a field called data visualization where you could design data, that was just so exciting to me. And it was in that moment that I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I want to be a data visualization designer. So again, I had all these skills, but then learning how to use specific tools and how to actually create visualizations in those tools, that was a whole nother set of skills. So I had to make a plan. If that's the road I wanted to take, and that was the journey I wanted to go on, I needed to make a plan and figure out, how do I get from here to there? So at this point, I was alone in my journey. I did not know anybody else who was I did not know anybody else who was a data visualization professional. And so that was an option. You know, sometimes people, when they're in a new possibility of taking a new route, they can just take the leap by themselves and give it a shot. But when you do that, there's a possibility that you're going to stumble and that you're going to delay your progress. You're going to miss your mark if you don't have specific guidance. So I knew for me, when I looked at the progress I was making, that the progress was slow and I was stumbling. And I knew that just taking the leap by myself couldn't be the only option out there, that there was some other alternatives that would help me in this process. So I knew I could benefit from a bridge, some type of support to help me get to the other side. And that's how I like to think about mentorship. Mentors and these other tools and resources that we have can be that support to help us to the other side.
Now, we know that bridges aren't always necessary. Like Alicia mentioned, there are gaps. You can sometimes leap over a gap. There are rivers. You can cross a river. You can ford the river. You can go around it. But that doesn't mean that the journey is any easier. It's actually more difficult and dangerous and longer. And the whole point of having a bridge is to get you to where you want to go faster and more easily. So let's talk about some of the kinds of bridges that you might have in your life. This is a pretty simple bridge. Doesn't get you very far. It's basically just whatever materials you found, you threw it together. This kind of bridge to us sort of represents the ad hoc relationship that you have with a colleague or with a friend. You just have one request, hey, can you help me out with this? Sure, here you go. Now you've made it from point A to point A, point A. Now this bridge is a bridge. It really likes being a bridge. Look at that. It's got design, it's got arches, it's got handrails, it's got knobs. Like, this bridge makes you feel good when you go over it. This bridge is really there for you. And this bridge we like to think of as more like coaching or cheerleading. This bridge wants to make you feel like you can get from point A to point B, and it'll be cruel and it'll be Instagram ready and everything. But what you can see is that it's actually pretty easy to cross this river without the coach. Like, you can just hop right along those rocks on the side. You'll barely get wet. It won't take you any less time. Like, it's helpful and it'll make you feel good, but it's not necessarily a bridge that's going to help you long term. It doesn't actually get you very far. You could probably go without the coach, although you'll feel better while you're doing it. This kind of bridge is more like an advisor. It's a much longer term relationship. And you'll see that there are points where the bridge is really helping you get across some water, but there's also times where you have this bridge, it's not actually doing anything because you could literally walk across the land that the bridge is walking across. And there are some times where you're going to come to an advisor, and your advisor is going to be able to help you. They're going to have the answers to the questions that you have. But there are other times when you're going to come to the advisor, and it'll be like the people at the top of the picture where, like, we don't really have an answer for you. You're kind of separated rather than walking together. So an advisor is a good long-term bridge, but it's not exactly what we're talking about here today. Some bridges are more like teaching. Like, you can have a teacher that's directly in front of you, an actual person, or it can be a teacher doing a webinar, a remote thing, a hands-on thing from afar, or just a video that you recorded, a blog, just any kind of instruction that you can find. But it's an asymmetrical relationship. Like, you don't know when you're going to need it or where it's going to go or how it's going to help you. And it's basically just you looking for help from people who are not going to be able to interact with you on any real way.
And sometimes you don't need much support at all. And that's fine if that works for you too.
Yeah, this is like barely a bridge, like this bridge right here. So what we want to talk about is, what does the bridge look like for the mentoring relationship that we're trying to put forth today? We want it to be something that's beneficial to both the mentor and the mentee long term.
So to me, this looks like the opposite of a barely a bridge, and this is actually what we're talking about today: formal mentorship. And with our mentorship, it had very specific elements to it. Like, we had a specific timeline, and we had an official agreement of terms. And we had very specific goals and milestones for those goals. Now, for some of you, what we'll talk about today might seem a little bit more formal, maybe unnecessary for what you're thinking about with a mentorship relationship. But for us, we want to show you what worked for us, because we believe that what we've done can be mutually beneficial and actually more effective in the mentorship relationship. So with that, we're going to be able to show you how we had those clear expectations for each other and how that really helped to facilitate this process. So for example, Mike agreed to help me, and so with that, I didn't have to feel bad about asking him another question. feel guilty about taking up too much of his time because he agreed to help me and to facilitate my success.
And with those parameters in place, having those boundaries, like I was able to give of myself freely to whatever it was that Alicia was asking, knowing that it wasn't going to lead to another question and another question and another thing. It wasn't going to become overwhelming. We both knew going in what this relationship was going to be as far as the commitment and the level of effort that's going to be required for both of us. And that's important to a successful mentorship.
And you might be wondering, why did we set it up this way? Well, it's because I was looking for advice. When I was thinking about the possibility of a mentor, I looked to other resources to see what's been done before and what could be a good possibility and route to take. So I read the book, 1 Minute Mentoring, and that really helped me to learn more about the process. Because I had mentors in the past in my academic career, but this was different because I was reaching out to a stranger, and I didn't want to waste anybody's time. So I wanted to make sure that I had a little bit of an understanding before making contact with someone. And one of the most useful things I got from this book was when they discussed the importance of vetting a potential mentor. And that's something that we're going to talk about today, is what that looks like and why that's important. So while this book could help me in understanding the mentorship process a little bit better, it certainly wasn't going to help me in being able to know who to reach out to or where to find that person. So that's something else that we want to make sure to share with you.
Okay. So what people report is the most frustrating part of a mentoring relationship is the very beginning of it. How do I get started? How do I know who's out there who's going to be a mentor? Let's go on to the next slide, actually. Okay. Sometimes it's really easy to know who's going to be a mentor because they have their hands up. They're saying, I want to be a mentor. They participate in things publicly, the discussions about mentorship. You see they have blog posts that are about mentorship, or they have mentor or other things in their social media profiles. Or they end up on podcasts talking about mentorship, or they end up at conferences talking about mentorship in front of people. It's really easy to tell when those people have their hands up. And actually, now that we mentioned podcasts, the Tableau Wannabe podcast a couple years ago, Emily, who hosts that, put up a mentor match dashboard. The URL is right there. Now, I'm not sure how active the mentoring match dashboard is right now. It will be more active if you participate in it, of course, and I would encourage you to do that. But the point is, when she put out a call originally for mentors, there are a couple dozen people who raised their hand and said, yes, I want to be a mentor. I'm willing to do this. And these are really easy people to figure out that they're here for you. They're willing to be mentors. But sometimes people don't have their hands up. Want to go on to the next one? We are going to give you an opportunity to put your hands up today. This is why we have buttons and stickers for you. We'll pass these around. Thank you. And just pass them up and down. If you want to put your hand up and say, I'm looking to be a mentee, grab the mentee sticker. If you want to be a mentor, grab the mentor sticker. Don't feel like you're one or the other. You can be both. Actually, I'm going to pass the pins around too. If you like pins better than stickers, here you go. Because you're very rarely in a place like this. You're very rarely at a gathering of several thousand people who all have similar interests to you, who all might be looking to meet people who could potentially be their mentor. And this is an excellent way to raise your hand and say, I am willing to be a mentor, or I would like to be mentored by somebody else. It's a really easy conversation starter if you already have your hand up when somebody sees you for the first time. But what if you don't have your hand up? What if you weren't lucky enough to attend this fabulous presentation and have fabulous gear to show people that you want to be a mentor or that you are a mentor? Well, maybe some of you know people already at your company or in your life who you think they would be a good mentor for me. You already have a personal relationship with them. And if that's true, that's awesome, because having a good personal relationship with somebody is an important element of having a mentoring relationship that is successful. But we aren't all that lucky. Some of us work in small places. Some of us don't have those kind of people around us. So we have to become detectives. We have to take some clues about how they act in public and figure out, is this person going to be a good mentor in general? So let's talk about who might be in their pool. Helpful people. That's pretty obvious because that's what we're asking for from a mentor. We want them to be helpful. We want them to be approachable. I like the story of people who, there was a woman who's like, oh yeah, when I was a kid I didn't have any friends, and she said, I only learned this because somebody, like a teacher at one point said, well, are you friendly? Oh, I'm not friendly. That's why I have no friends. People who are approachable are the people who are more likely to be good mentors for you. They answer questions. Like, you can see this online. If you participate in any online community, you'll see people on forums, you'll see people on Twitter who are eager to answer questions from other people, from strangers, from friends, from anybody. They want to share their knowledge. Like, because there are people, yeah, because there are people who feel like knowledge is a commodity. Like, if they share it, then they're just enriching somebody else. They're not giving of themselves. But there are other people who see that knowledge is a universal good, and they want to share knowledge with people. These are the people you want to have in your pool. Ultimately, what we're talking about is people who are going to be good mentors are people who show up. They do more. They volunteer for things. They don't always restrict themselves to what is required of them. And once you figure out that these are the sorts of people you should be looking for, you'll realize that there's a much bigger pool of mentors out there, even if they don't have their hands up, who you could consider as potential people for you to reach out to.
Since this is specifically for Tableau, we thought that a good place to start would be here at Tableau Conference. And if you go back home, maybe go into a Tableau user group or some other type of meetup. So you can look for those familiar faces, the people that tend to show up, like Mike was saying, tend to be active, tend to be participating on a regular basis. And if you're just looking for like a list of names to start from, my Tableau also is recognizing those people in the community. These are the Tableau ambassadors. These are the people who are showing that they are participating in the community and answering questions and providing that assistance. So, and then you can also look in other online communities. So for example, if you're on Twitter, or you're looking at who is answering a lot of questions in the Tableau forums, those are all good places too. And for me, when, and also other people who participate in those other Tableau initiatives, things like Makeover Monday, or Workout Wednesday, or Bits for Social Good, those are people too who are consistently active and are interested in this topic. And that's how I found Mike, was through Makeover Monday actually. He was participating in Makeover Monday, he was submitting visualizations on a regular basis, and I would see his work, and every week I would look at it and think, well, that's so clever, well, that's interesting, how did he do that? And it was through seeing his work on Makeover Monday that I then found out that he had a blog, and then I started to read his blog posts, and I just really appreciated then what he was saying in his blog about creating and sharing your work and sharing yourself with your work. So that's how I was able to learn about Mike and learn about what he does and his perspective with his work. So, right, these are a lot of different options as far as trying to find different pools of people. But what we want to encourage you is to think about more specifically then. So you've got this whole pool of people that you could potentially contact, but then take it a step further and think about what would help you with a specific person. Like, what kind of characteristics would you need for a specific person? So before you contact anyone, just take some time to think about those qualities that are important to you and what you're looking for. So for example,
Switch back to that.
I'm going to do this. Okay. This is what I'm doing now. Here we go. All right. Can you tell? Professor. Oh, do I have to keep that on?
I turned the hand mic off.
I got it. I got this. I got this. Brother. All right.
I didn't teach you that.
No. So, right, for example, with proximity, I appreciated that Mike and I were both in the Maryland, DC area, because that meant that we could then meet in person once a month. And so that was important to me. That may not be a consideration for you. And, you know, video chat works really great as well, and that is an option. But for me, I appreciated that we were in the same location. You also want to think about the other person and your own availability. How much time do you have for this? It's time consuming. And you want to think about what kind of time commitment you're thinking about for kind of regular interactions and working on those goals that you're trying to achieve. And then also think about what the type of communication you want to have. So with all three of these, for example, are once a week emails good for you? And so you have to think about how do you want to communicate and how often do you want to communicate and what do you want to talk about? So for us, we started with basically a once a week kind of email recap of what had happened and what are we working on and where are we struggling. And so that worked in email for a little while. I found email to not be as efficient as other possibilities. So then we switched over to a video chat once a week. And that was a little bit more effective because then we could show each other work and we could have that conversation kind of in real time versus email, which was just kind of a lot of back and forth and again, not as efficient. You also want to think about what type of guidance and expertise you're looking for, so that for me, I wanted to be able to have somebody who could review my design work and give me some feedback to be able to improve what my process was. And Mike was able to do that for me. And so for you, you might be looking for somebody that could help you if you're in a consulting role. Maybe you want a little bit of guidance on how to navigate those responsibilities and those expectations. Or maybe you're trying to learn a new tool and you'd like somebody to help you out with learning SQL or Alteryx or Python or R. So just think about those areas that you might be struggling and where you could use a little bit more support and a helping hand to help you navigate those new skills. Also, I didn't need a white woman of my age as a mentor, but that might be a consideration. So gender and ethnicity, even maybe lifestyle considerations could be important to you. That's something you want to think about as you're choosing who to have as a mentor. Now, based on the qualities that were important to me, I had identified Mike as a potential mentor. So then the next step to send out an email and to start that conversation. Okay. This first contact, this first communication is important not only to find out whether Mike could support my goals and give me that assistance, but also to be able to determine whether we clicked personality-wise. And so that's an important piece, again, of vetting the potential mentor. Now, I can also tell you that I only contacted Mike. I didn't send out 10 different emails to 10 different people saying, hey, would you be my mentor? I only contacted Mike based on those qualities that I knew were important to me.
And that was of value to me because it's really nice to know that you're not just one name on the end of an email blast that went out to everybody, because you're trying to start a personal relationship with somebody, and so you don't want to just be like, oh, this was just a bulk email. So, what kind of things do you want to see, to me, as a potential mentor, what kind of things would I want to see in a message that I receive from somebody who's asking me to consider having them as a mentee? Well, the first thing would be, I would like to know that, I think it's that they've done their homework, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to know that the person who's reaching out to you knows who you are, who the potential mentor is personally.
So you might say something like, you know, I really enjoyed your recent blog post. I enjoyed those specific posts on finding your voice, having some options.
And since this is going to be a relationship that's a personal relationship, you want to make sure that if you have any kind of commonalities between you, you want to point that out in the email that you're sending when you originally make contact.
So maybe something like, oh, you and Pooja and I were selected as favorites for Makeover Monday, week 30.
Hey, who sees where this is going? The next thing is you want to express why you have a specific interest in the person that you're sending the message to.
So I think you have a really insightful and inspiring perspective. I also really appreciate your data viz work.
And next you want to make sure that there's an action item, a very specific, a very small, but intentional request, so that I don't see the message just as, I don't know, what do you want me to do with this? It's nice that you're saying these things, but what actually are you asking of me?
I would like to have a conversation with you in person. To be completely honest and forthright, I am seeking out a mentor. If you would be willing to have a 30-minute conversation with me, please reply to this message.
And as always, say thank you.
Everybody always appreciates when you say thank you. So do that all the time, yes.
All right. So who's ready for the big reveal? Oh, hey.
What? What is this? Oh my gosh. This is the message that I sent out to Mike on September 4th. I guess I wasn't originally going to say this, but I was nervous about sending this message, okay? I read it over and rewrote it and made sure that it said all of those things that helped me to really communicate what I was trying to do here. So this is the message that I sent out to Mike. I sent it through meetup.com.
You know, that famous social media platform, meetup.com. So I originally thought that this message came to me via LinkedIn because why would it come from meetup.com?
Right. Why did I use meetup.com? Because I tried to send a message to Mike through LinkedIn. I tried to send a message to Mike through Twitter, but he wasn't following me, and he wasn't connected to me. And at the time, his messages were closed to people he wasn't following or connected to.
Yeah,
this
DM's
was my
open
only,
now, by the way.
This was my only option. So I did it. I did it through meetup.com.
Yeah. So, well, the fact that Alicia went through all of this to send me a message sends its own message, right? It sends a message that she's actually very serious about not just seeking out a mentor, but about wanting me personally to be her mentor. Now, I'm not saying you have to go through all of these hoops, figure out hoops to jump through to contact the person you want to be your mentor, but I am saying it really signifies how important this was to her. And it made it very important to me to give it all kinds of consideration. So I went to her Tableau public profile. I looked and saw, well, she's definitely doing work. She really wants to get better. You can see that she's making progress. I was flattered by the stuff that she said in the message. And ultimately, 30-minute meeting for all this is nothing. Like, of course I would go and talk to her about that. And for me, it was also interesting to have this opportunity arise for me because, like I said, I sort of work I'm like a sole practitioner of Tableau at my company. Like, I don't have a big community, especially at the time, I didn't really have a big community of people. I didn't get a chance to affect people's personal development in Tableau on a regular basis. And Alicia showed up with exactly that opportunity. And I thought this has the opportunity for me to be really enjoyable and really rewarding to help somebody along their journey and maybe knock down some of the barriers so that she doesn't have to go through them.
So Mike replied the very next day said he'd be happy to have that conversation and see if there's anything he could do to help. So we met the following Wednesday at Riverside Coffee in Maryland, and this conversation is it's a get-to-know-you meeting. It's this is what I'm looking for. Do you think you could help me with this support? And do we click personality-wise? That's important. So we had the meeting, and as you can see, it all went well. We decided to move forward. We made that decision during the meeting. We said, well, this seems good. Okay, let's do that. But looking back now, we would say, have the meeting, and then go home, think about it, send a message the next day and say, you know, I felt good about that. It seems like this could work out. What do you think? Would you like to move forward? So send that message the next day to be able to make that confirmation. You don't necessarily have to make that decision in that first meeting, like right there in person.
Right.
And you can ask them if they agree. But also keep in mind that this first conversation, again, is just getting to know in person those types of possibilities. You've got these qualities that you're looking for. Those are good conversation starters that you can have with that person and make that decision. But know that just because you meet with somebody in person doesn't mean that it's going to work out and that you're going to click. So just be aware that and use some caution and know that that's okay if it doesn't seem like it'll work out based on that first meeting. Know that it's up to you as a mentee to really make sure that you're getting the support you need. So you can say, you know, wow, it was really great to meet with you. Thank you for your time. I can tell you're really busy. You know, let's try to. But you don't have to move forward if it doesn't feel right. So know that that is a possibility and that you can choose to contact somebody else if it doesn't seem like it's going to work out.
But it did. So let's say what the next step is to set up specific goals. And when specific goals, it's SMART goals, right? It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. Yes. But in addition to making sure that your goals are SMART goals, you want to make sure that you're picking goals that make sense for a mentoring relationship, goals that a mentor can actually help you achieve. Because otherwise, what is the point of this? You could achieve goals on your own without a mentor. If somebody can't help you, then that's not the kind of goal you want to set up for this.
So based on our conversations and thinking about what Mike could help me with and what I wanted to do, we set up 4 specific and larger goals for me to work towards. The first one was to be able to get certified in Tableau. So it was the Qualified Associate Certification. So I spent October and then part of November going through a Udemy online course, doing a lot of practice questions to be able to prepare to take the Qualified Associate Certification exam.
And that was my role as the mentor, was to make sure that she had the training materials that she needed and to help go over with her the stuff that she maybe didn't feel strongly about and maybe give her more advice on how to better prepare for the test. And to continually harass, nag, bother, encourage her to actually sign up for the test.
Yes. And then I finally did outright mid-November, and then I passed. Yay. Yeah, thanks. The second kind of larger goal was to expand my professional network. And so with this, it was trying to become more visible in the data visualization community, trying to make more connections professionally with the possibility that that could lead to maybe a new role, a new position.
And of course, I already had a professional network when Alicia contacted me. So when we both attended conference last year, I made sure that Alicia was with me and I was able to introduce her to a lot of people, made sure that she was involved in the user groups locally, and made sure that she had a bigger presence on social media than she had otherwise, because it's really easy for me to boost things that people are putting up on social media because my network is larger. It would be much harder for Alicia to break through that way on her own without assistance of other advocates like a mentor.
And I contacted him in September last year. Tableau conference, my first conference I attended just a month later, and it was so nice. Like, what great timing on my part to make that contact, because then Mike and I just like hung out all week, and he was able to introduce me to a bunch of people, and it was just great to feel like I belonged there in the community because Mike was there supporting those connections. I also wanted to build up my Tableau public portfolio. I had a few vizzes already that I was creating for Makeover Monday, for example, but I knew that it was important for me to continue to get that practice and to continue to build my portfolio.
And so as a mentor, I felt like my job was to set specific goals for her, like, oh, this month I want to make sure that you do at least 2 Makeover Mondays, or when she would do some and maybe in draft form, like we would go over like what she had done or what she was trying to do, or maybe give her more suggestions about other directions she could go in.
Yeah, there were 2 specific Makeover Monday submissions that I was working on. I showed Mike a draft of it, and then we talked about other possibilities for how to create what I was interested in, so he gave me assistance that way. And then there was one that was posted on the Tableau Public Gallery, and then there was a second one that, again, I had showed, we had talked about, Mike had given me feedback on, and that became one of the favorites for Makeover Monday that week. So certainly his feedback and his input was helpful in getting those vizzes to be more widely recognized. Ultimately, all of this was working towards being able to get a full-time data visualization position. I mean, really, all of these things were feeding into, but that was the major goal that I was working towards. So for this, I was applying to a number of different places. I had a handful of interviews. For the interviews and the positions, I would often have to do a work sample, create a dashboard to show that I had the skills. I didn't show Mike my work sample. I didn't get his feedback. It seemed like that should be something I would just do on my own. But certainly we checked in every single week to say, here's what the progress was, and here's where I'm at. Yes, I got an interview for this place, or yes, I submitted this, or here's another place that I applied to. I got the application sent just last week.
Right. There's not a lot that I can directly do to get Alicia a job. I didn't have a job to give her. But the point is, like, it's on me as the mentor to figure out, if these are Alicia's goals, what am I specifically going to do to help get her closer to where she wants to go? And so that was just, telling her, like, yeah, you should apply for this, you are ready for this, you should apply for this anyway, or, like, I don't know why you're interested in this.
And something else that happened was there was one particular position that I was really excited about, and I thought, this is good, things are going good. Like, it was a really long interview process, and I kept doing well, and then I didn't get it. and I didn't get the job. And it was just nice to have Mike there to be angry and disappointed with me. That was good too, just to have that.
Yeah. Okay, so there's also logistics. Like we've talked about this already a little bit in detail, so I don't have to go over it specifically, but you need to know how long is your mentoring arrangement going to last. We picked 6 months because for the goals that Alicia set out for herself, 3 months seemed too short, it was unreasonable. A year, you know what happens when you say things are gonna last a year, it lasts a year because it starts in month 11. That's dumb. So we thought 6 months was a good enough time to get closer to the goals that Alicia wanted to get to, but also it was long enough that we felt like we could complete this particular length of time. And remember, we didn't know each other. And you want to make sure that whatever you're committing to, you can see through to the end. So even if it was a mediocre relationship, like we could probably stick it out for 6 months, but a year sounds terrible. So 6 months was a reasonable length of time, and we figured we could revisit it afterwards. We also decided on communication, like Alicia said, we originally did email. Eventually we switched to doing web chats. Like, I absolutely recommend doing web chats. But we also met in person once a month because having a personal face-to-face meeting was important to Alicia. Our 1 hour meetings often lasted 3 hours.
Yeah. So we met at the end of that 6 month term. We had an in-person meeting and we met, and I brought with me a dashboard that showed the progress that I had made for that time frame. So, right, I had created a dashboard where I was tracking my progress, because that's important too, is to figure out whether you're making progress in those goals and where the mentor could be helping in that process. So what I did was create a dashboard that showed a year progression from April 2017 through March 2018, which was our 6-month meeting. And what I chose for my Tableau data viz journey anyway, it was starting a Twitter account was what I considered to be the start point of that.
Yeah, right there.
Because that was so that I could submit for Makeover Monday, and that was really the only reason I'd started a Twitter account. So I consider that to be my start point. And then you can see here that I was making some progress for those first few months, but not really consistently for the entire month of July. But then in September, when I contacted Mike, and when we had that first meeting. And then from there, I can see more progress happening for, these are events, these are milestones that I had been tracking. For example, events on my calendar, I had notes in my planner, I had the emails from Mike, I had my Twitter feed, lots of different places where I could go back and look and see what these milestones were. And then what I did was I just put them all into a spreadsheet and then, yeah, just made this from it. So there were a couple of specific occasions, like when I contacted Mike about being a mentor on September 4th, when I passed the qualified associate exam, that was, you know, a goal that I had. Also, and everything in blue here was something that Mike had helped with, that he played some type of role in for that milestone. So when I submitted to give a talk at the Tableau Fringe Festival, that was because Mike had said, hey, you should think about giving a talk at the Tableau Fringe Festival. And so by doing that, I made additional connections that had resulted in some other projects from that experience. So yeah, for me, I think I can see that the progress I was making was a result of Mike's input in my process.
So Alicia is amazing at keeping track of things. Like, two things about this, actually maybe 3 even. One is, it's really satisfying to me to see right here on the screen, this is how much a mentor can affect the development of a mentee. Like, if you think that there's value to it, like this actually shows you there is great value to it. Another is the very existence of this dashboard is very satisfying to me because Alicia couldn't have done this before we started mentoring. She's able to do it now because of the development that she made while we had this relationship going on, and there's a lot of pride that I feel in seeing this up on the screen. But it leads us also to the idea that you do need to track your progress while you're in this mentoring relationship. Like, you need to know, are you making progress towards your goals, but also, is your mentor helping you make progress towards these goals? Because you might be progressing all on your own and your mentor's got nothing to do with it. And you need to know that, and so does your mentor. You need to have these conversations, I mean respectful conversations, I'm sure, but have these conversations while you go to make sure that the mentoring relationship is working for both of you.
So you can
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, right, the 6 months that we had for that initial term, that time just flew by. And so at our 6-month meeting, we could look at that dashboard and say, well, it looks like some progress was being made in these particular areas, and that's great. Sometimes it exceeded our expectations for what was being accomplished. And of course, it's always important to celebrate those wins, celebrate those successes. In other cases, we saw that there wasn't as much progress as we would have liked. So for example, I didn't have as many new projects in my Tableau public portfolio as I would have liked to. So there were some areas that we knew we still needed to work on. And even though I was maybe incorrectly optimistic, where I initially thought I could get a new data viz position in 6 months, that didn't happen. I didn't have a new position in March of 2018. So for that reason too, the largest goal that we had was not being met yet. So we had to make some decisions about whether we would continue for an additional length of time.
So when you get to that point where you want to decide, should this continue, you should ask yourself 3 questions. First is actually a 2-part question, but is like, do I think that there are goals that I could meet with my mentor in the next, like, are there goals that my mentor can still help me to meet in the next time around? And did my mentor actually help me to achieve the goals that I had in the first place? Like, and do we both want to continue? Mm-hmm. That's important too.
Yep. So we decided to go ahead and re-up, change some of the terms, change some of the goals, and decided to move forward with another 6 months. And so because we were doing another 6 months, there were slightly different goals that were intended for that later 6 months. So for example, because I had the qualified associate certification, I was able to swap that out with more independent projects. So for example, I started a research project with Sean Levin where we're measuring how people respond to infographics. I also started some freelance work with Evergreen Data, and so that started in mid-April. That was something that took a lot of time and that Mike has been able to provide assistance with when I bang my head against the wall because I don't know how to do something, where I can then just send Mike an email and say, you know, I've been trying to do this, I don't know how to get this done, and he has a nice, elegant, clever solution for what I'm trying to accomplish in Tableau. I also wanted to continue to increase professional visibility. So with that, for example, giving talks like the one today, that helps me to get my name and out there. So that's been helpful. And then I also wanted to make sure to continue to increase my Tableau skills and my portfolio. And I can tell you that, especially in just the last couple of months, I could feel a change in myself where I had started to notice that the skills and tips and tricks that Mike had shared with me over the months were things that I could apply to other later projects. So I was seeing this ability to come back and use those skills that I had acquired earlier. And so it was just kind of the switch in me that I felt that I could now solve problems on my own, not necessarily needing to Mike again, because he had already provided guidance from before. So it's been really great to see and to have that level of confidence that's greater as a result of these experiences. Now, as far as the permanent data viz position, well, I can tell you, I got a job. Yeah! I got a job. Get this. Okay. I got the email from the company, University System of Maryland, while I was sitting at the same coffee shop. And exactly 1 year from the day that Mike and I first met. Mm-hmm. So that was fun. And, so obviously I have benefited enormously from Mike's mentorship, right? Not only getting a new job, but having that new level of confidence in my skills. And also by just getting a couple of new friends along the way too, by being a part of this community and connecting with others, that's been a great benefit as well.
The true mentorship is the friends we made along the way.
Right?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about how this is going to benefit you as a mentee. But let's talk a little bit more about the potential mentors in the room. How does this benefit you to be the bridge? What's in it for you? You know? Well, let me say this. Anybody who's ever taught a class, anybody who's ever parented a child, anybody who's ever captained a team, anyone who has ever led a project, understands just how much value there is, how much satisfaction you get from watching other people succeed thanks to what you have done to put them in a position to succeed. But beyond that, not just the altruistic value of it, Alicia comes to Tableau from a completely different perspective than I do. She has a different way of using the tool, like simple interaction. She does things differently than I do, and I'm like, oh, I never knew you could do that. She thinks about data visualization differently. She thinks about Tableau differently. She asks questions of me that I would never have thought to ask questions of to myself. The fact that I interact with people on a regular basis, like Alicia, who can take a different look at how data visualization works, makes me see data visualization differently, and gives me a broader understanding of the field and of Tableau. Alicia continues to teach me just by asking questions, just by learning about it with my help. So that brings us to the next thing was, can you be both? Can you be both a mentor and a mentee? Obviously, the answer is yes. I just sort of blew that reveal. I mean, you think you're looking at a mentor and a mentee, but actually you are looking at two mentees on the stage, because what you're looking at are just the leaves of a very tall, very old, very thick tree of mentorship. A year ago, 2 years ago, I arrived at Tableau conference. I knew basically nobody. I was not a very well-known person in the Tableau community, and it's very intimidating to an introvert to arrive here without a support system. And there's a then and current Zen master, Bridget Cogley, who might be in the room today, but I'm not going to look at her because I will break up, who took notice of me and brought me in and taught me about the history of Tableau. She taught me about the people who made Tableau what it was. She taught me about the Kelly Martin, who basically invented dashboard design here, made the artistic side of Tableau the thing that I care the most about, something that was possible for all of us. She taught me about her mentor, Michael Christiani, who we lost this year, who I now refer to as my grand mentor. She is the connection to the previous generations of people who taught me, and I want to be the connection to the generations who will teach the next generations. The whole point of being the bridge is so that everybody doesn't have to go through the things that we went through when we were younger. So, can you be a mentor and a mentee contemporarily? Yeah, of course you can. Let's say that I want to learn how to be better at doing things that are persuasive. Let's say I want to learn how to do things better about making people follow my call to action, about be persuaded by the things that I do. I might want to turn to somebody who has a history of doing social psychology. She might have a PhD in it, and she might have done research studies on this thing. Alicia could very easily be my mentor, and I could be her mentee, which is a real, the student has become the master moment. But the truth is that we are all students and we are all masters. So, I want to leave you with this today. Make sure that when you are setting out on your mentorship journey, you need to figure out what gaps it is, that you need bridges to cross. Define the obstacles that are in your way, and then figure out how you're going to overcome those obstacles. Then take a good look around you, figure out who the mentors are using the tools and suggestions that we've laid out today. See who can help you to overcome those obstacles. And then start the conversation. I know it can be scary, but start the conversation.
And when you have that meeting and it sounds like it's going well and you pick that person to be your mentor, again, what we talked about here was a very structured process where you are setting a timeline, have those expectations, identify those goals that are specific and measurable, track your progress, because by doing that, you can then see whether you are successful in that mentorship. So if you do have that open communication, then you can let the mentor know as the mentee where you stand. Because it's really up to the mentee to keep people on track and to make it clear where things stand. Then at the end of the term, you can decide to revise the contract, you can renew the goals, you can decide that maybe you're good here and you were able to achieve those goals that you wanted. And in that case, maybe you want to retire the mentorship and end it at that point, or maybe take a pause.
Now, we know that it can be intimidating. I've mentioned this a number of times, especially for people who are introverted, especially for people who aren't that outgoing. to make that first step to reach out to a mentor, because you're naturally reaching out to somebody who you think of as somebody who's more developed than you or more well-known than you, and why would they have to do anything for me? But I'm telling you, people love to be asked. Make that first step. Don't be afraid to reach out to them, especially because for an introvert, a mentoring relationship, a personal connection, a one-on-one experience is absolutely the way that you are going to learn the most from Tableau. So if we can do anything to make it easier, to facilitate this for you, if the tips that we have given you help you along your way, that's all we can ask for. And if we can do more for you, please let us know.
So we hope that our talk today has inspired you to think about those areas where a mentor might help you, and that if you have found that you can feel comfortable with starting that conversation. Thanks.
All right, thanks. If there are any questions, besides should I rate this 5 stars in the survey, the answer is yes. If there are other questions, we have a wonky mic you can use. Lyndon, you're doing your best. I appreciate the help that you're providing today. Can't you fix physics?
We'll see if this works for me. I teach a class at the university too, so I know all about microphone problems. It's terrible. First off, how dare you make me try to cry talking about being a father and being a mentor. So it seems like this is the perfect mentor-mentee relationship, where the mentee is very detail-oriented, tracks everything, and it's just great, right? So you're set up for success by having a mentee who really wants to be that person. So without like spinning this into a negative light, what if you were in a situation where the mentee is not as perfectly set up, right? So you start out with all the good signs, right? You have the meeting, everything seems like it's going well, and you as the mentor want to help this person, and then the mentee kind of falls off the wagon, I guess. How do you deal with, how would you potentially deal with that, if that is how this relationship would have went?
Well, one thing we didn't specifically mention, but is an important thing to remember, is that in the mentee-mentor relationship, the proactive party always has to be the mentee, because they are the one who's going to get the most direct benefit out of it. I mean, yes, we benefit too as mentors, but it has to be on them. And if they are choosing not to do the work, what can you do? You can say, that's why we want to have these honest conversations. We can say, I'm setting out milestones for you, but you're not following the, like, I need to know that you're serious about this. But this is also why we want to have a limited, length of time, because then the third question of, do we both want to continue? The answer is at least one person doesn't, you don't, and maybe 2 people don't, because they've demonstrated that they don't want to do it. I mean, I would like to believe that a person who is in a mentoring relationship, who is the mentee, is in it for themselves. They want to do good, and if they're not following through for themselves, they're hurting themselves. I mean, you can point this out to them, sure, or you can say, well, I need to break this down into smaller goals. I mean, it's their goals, right? But your job as the mentor is to figure out what milestones to get them towards their goals. And if they're not following them, maybe you need to downgrade the milestones, or maybe you need to make them like, look, man, like I gotta say, like, I can't keep going with this if you're not gonna be all in.
Right. Because I mean, initially you might have set the scope too high or the bar too high, right?
Yeah, and that's a reason.
That might deter you as the mentee. It's like, I can't achieve this in this amount of time.
There were lots of times I failed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Curtis, can you pass the mic back there? Thank you. Curtis Harris, everybody.
Thank you. In the building off of that question, what about a situation where the mentee is too ambitious and has trouble accepting smaller goals and encouragements towards focus?
Well,
smaller steps.
You can remind the mentee that they're not achieving their goals, they're progressing towards their goals, right? Like that's one reason why tracking is important, is because you want them to be able to see progress. I mean, yes, they might be ambitious people. I think a lot of us are ambitious people. And sometimes it's, are you comparing yourself against somebody? Are you comparing yourself against are you comparing yourself against the amalgam of everybody who is a master of everything and does everything quickly? That's unreasonable. If you are the mentor and you know that this is not how it works, then yeah, it's up to you to have that heart-to-heart with you. That's part of teaching the mentee about having those realistic expectations. I don't know if that helps you with any specific tips on making sure that they're having a reasonable expectation. But yeah, that is on you as the voice of wisdom to be wise.
It does, thank you.
Sure. I don't know. Mix, you're closer.
I was wondering about what surprised you most in this journey. I think it's probably a question mostly for Alicia, because you came in driving this and asking Mike for the guidance, whereas Mike, you didn't really know, weren't even following Alicia's work as well beforehand, so a lot of it was probably a surprise to you. So what ran counter to the expectations? And by the way, wonderful job amidst all the technical difficulties.
One thing that really surprised me is how much we could achieve in a year and how much this worked. Wow. I was just like, I'm blown away that contacting Mike and having that opportunity to interact with him was just so effective. I wasn't expecting it to really work out that well. And all of these other, again, kind of benefits of having that additional confidence or meeting additional people and making those additional connections. I mean, I was really just focusing on, okay, I need to learn these skills and I need to, set these goals for that. But it's all the other stuff too about connecting with people and having those new relationships that were just a bonus that I wasn't really intending to go in saying, well, I'm gonna become friends with Mike and we're gonna be able to, just be friends that get along and can just talk to each other about other things outside of the mentorship too. So that's a nice kind of side benefit that also occurred that I wasn't really expecting to find.
Sometimes it's really hard to find a person who is perfectly being a mentor for you. Like some really have a really good career development, and then some really good in the technical skills. And then sometimes you cannot find a person who is completely, good in both ways. Can we have more than one mentor, or how do you manage that?
Mm-hmm.
Time and then everything.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So you can have more than one mentor if you're identifying that I think this person would help me with these specific skills or this specific goal, but I think that I need a different person for this specific set of skills or goals. Sure. The only kind of drawback to having multiple mentors is the time commitment, the way that we set it up. So it takes a lot of time to be checking in, to making progress on a lot of different goals and trying to just keep track of all of that. The only drawback is to find yourself maybe spread a little bit thin if you're trying to accomplish so much all at the same time. Maybe think about having the mentor and working towards specific goals for that specific 6 months, and then if you're finding yourself kind of again spread thin, maybe think about, okay, then I can switch to this other mentor for the future 6 months, or that's a goal later on that I can then reach out to that person and really focus on that.
And I would add that our mentorship relationship is actually relatively intense. We met very frequently. We actually put a lot of time into it on a regular basis. There's nothing that says that you can't set up multiple mentorships that are a little more relaxed. Maybe you only meet once a month. Maybe you only meet every 3 months, but you stay in touch every 2 or 3 weeks via email. It doesn't have to be exactly what ours is. The parts of what we did that we think are valuable are the goal setting and the setting of expectations and making sure that you're making the right choice at the first place of finding a person who's going to work for you and making sure you have a clean out if it doesn't work for you.
And one other thing I wanted to mention is I know some other people meet in groups, right? So it's not just a one-on-one relationship. It is 4 or 5 people coming together and all being able to give feedback and hear each other's challenges and to be able to give input. So that's an option too, is to set it up in that way where you are hearing from multiple people.
Maybe one more question, or if not, we can be done. All right, great guys. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.